Hey guys, and welcome to the CS Classroom. In this video, I want to talk about how computer science students can use ChatGPT in order to enhance their learning experience. Basically, to make them more effective in learning this subject. In this video, I want to talk about why I decided to create the video, what some of the motivations were, and then I want to go over 6 different capabilities that ChatGPT offers that computer science students can take advantage of. After each one of those capabilities, I'm also going to go over some specific prompts or examples of prompts that students can use to take advantage of said feature. Finally, I'll finish off talking about course-specific GPTs. This is a very recent feature from OpenAI, which is the creator of ChatGPT, and this refers to the ability to create customized GPTs based on the subject, one of which I've created myself, which you may have seen in a previous video. That being said, let's get started. Now first, why did I create this? Well, on this YouTube channel, I have a ton of subscribers learning computer science, and a lot of them are in high school. They're kind of coming of age as computer science students at the same time that ChatGPT and other LLM-based tools are exploding. And while I would say ChatGPT came out about a year ago, people still don't use it effectively. A lot of people can use it in very simplistic manners, so maybe asking it very simple questions or just trying to extract knowledge out of it. But I feel like a lot of people, not even just students, still don't understand how to exploit these LLM-based tools like ChatGPT. And moreover, in my opinion, such tools as ChatGPT are essential 21st century skills. Now, you may not lose your job to ChatGPT, or you may not lose out on a job to ChatGPT in the future, but you'll definitely lose out to someone who knows how to use it more effectively than you. So let's get started. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to start with the first, in my opinion, one of the most interesting features, which is uploading and answering an exam paper or exam paper questions. So we can upload a PDF, analyze it, look at questions, and then answer them. So let me just go ahead and demo how we can do that. So I'm going to choose an exam paper that I have previously created. So it's called OOP. And basically what it is a list of about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different object-oriented programming related questions. And if you are familiar with the IB computer science exam or curriculum, you may note that this is option D from a past paper. So I can go ahead and upload this to ChatGPT. And what I want to say is provide me. So I'm just telling it to give me some answers. And then I'm going to tell it what type of answers to give. So the answers should be in text or in the form of text or Java code. Then what I want to do is specify the number of questions and their format. There are 5 multi-part questions to be answered. So multi-part questions to be answered. Each sub, let's say we can say subpart, or each part of a question is signified by a letter like A, B, C. So in this prompt, what I did is I basically said what I wanted, and then I specified the format of the exam paper, as well as the number of questions and how those questions themselves are formatted. And I also talked about what form my answer should be. So it should be in the form of text or Java code. So let's go ahead and execute this prompt and see what happens. So we're going to start by reading the document. And let's wait for this to all load before we kind of comment on it. Okay, so we're about done generating. It took some time because that is a lot of data to analyze, and generally the answers are pretty good. Now, sometimes the pitfall can be that the actual code in the document isn't taken into account, but it seems like all the answers that were written in Java did actually take into account the code that was already included in the exam. One significant downside is that diagrams can't really be created in ChatGPT. So anytime you have a UML diagram or something that needs to be represented graphically, then that's not going to work. But that's a quick sort of demo of how we can actually just upload exam papers and use them in ChatGPT. Now I'm going to go to our next feature. Notice in this slideshow I have some of the drawbacks, which I sort of talked about in my description, as well as some tips. Those will be in the description, and you can take a look at those after the video. But anyways, I want to move on to the next feature, which is to generate practice questions based on previous questions that have been pasted or uploaded. So for example, if you look at our exam paper, let's look at question 14, where, well, actually maybe not question 14. Let's look at question 12, where we need to construct the method average delay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to ChatGPT. I'm going to say, generate 3 questions that are similar to question 12b in the document I uploaded. Include any code that is required to answer these questions. And notice I basically told it what I wanted, how many questions I wanted, and what I wanted the questions to be similar to. And then I also included any additional resources I want to be able to solve those problems. Because once this generates it, it may not give me the Java code similar to what I would see in an exam paper. So I guess it gave me, to create a method, it kind of gave me some sample answers. And I really wanted the code that would be used to generate those answers. But I'm sure I could actually modify my prompt. I could say something like, give me the initial code required to generate any solutions. But I'm not going to do that now. That's kind of one of the things to take into consideration. Make sure you give ChatGPT all the details and context that's required to generate the questions that will be most helpful to you. So now let's move on to our next capability, which is to re-explain existing questions. So there might be certain questions on the exam that aren't so clear. And this is definitely true of not only the IB computer science exam, but just about any exam, because all external, very institutional exams kind of have their own style of constructing and communicating prompts or questions. So let's take a look again at our past paper, and let's pick a question right here. Let's say that we don't really understand 10a. Okay, let's go ahead and ask ChatGPT to re-explain that question to us. So can you explain 10a in the document I uploaded in a different way so that I can understand it better? Let's see what happens. So it's going to take a look at the document again, which is probably a good thing. It's actually much faster than it was a few days ago. So, okay. So question A is about uploading why the train company class can have 2 different constructors. It actually gives like a pretty good overview of not only the question, but also the answers, right? And wow, this is actually pretty exhaustive. I didn't really expect that. If I don't want all this, I would say, can you just rephrase 10a? Yeah, so that's actually pretty good. That's pretty legit. And I think it's really useful because you may not understand like exam questions or specific types of questions, but if you see it explained in different ways, you'll probably get a better understanding of the vernacular of the exam. Now, our next feature is to get code explanations. So we can actually input a block of code into ChatGPT and have it explained to us. So let's take a look at an example of that. So what I can do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy this block of code from here, which is a recursive function for calculating the factorial, and recursion is challenging. And I'm going to paste it. Well, I'm going to say, please explain how the following code works. And then I'm going to paste it and just go ahead and enter and just see what it says. Now, this is actually a pretty exhaustive explanation of how the method works. Now, I would say that this is actually one of the reasons reasons why it's better to paste and ask for an explanation of a smaller method or a smaller function, just a smaller block of code rather than something larger, because you're not going to get this granular an explanation if you paste more code in. Additionally, one thing you can do is if you're only interested in certain parts, you could just say, for example, can you explain the recursive call in more depth? And then you can kind of dive deeper into more specific parts of the code, which in my opinion is probably the more useful thing to do. And as you can see right here, you just get a ton of detail on how things work. Now there might be terminology you don't understand, like execution stack or unwinding the stack, but the cool thing about ChatGPT is that you can go ahead and ask it for more information and explain that further to get a full understanding of how things work. Or you can say explain it in a simpler way using more simpler terminology, if that's kind of too much for you. Like if all this stuff with the stack and the multiplication chain and stuff like that is too much. So it's actually giving you a pretty good example. Think of the factorial function like a series of steps to climb down a ladder. And yeah, actually this is a pretty good explanation, probably better than I would do as a teacher. Cool, so you've got like a pretty solid description right here. I would say this is like one of the most useful features in ChatGPT. I also want to mention Replit because Replit lets you do something similar in the sense that you can actually just click on lines of code and then you can get AI generated explanations of what they do. Now, as I said in this slideshow, there's some prompts. I'm not really going to go through those, but if you want to see some example prompts, you can go ahead and check the link in the description, as well as some additional tips and some of the drawbacks of some of these different methods. And the next thing you can do is troubleshoot code. So for example, let's say I paste this code and I just change something. Or actually, let's go back to the code base that I took this from. So right here, let's just say just pretend that I forget the base case. One way that I can approach this is, or one way I can use ChatGPT is I can just say, tell me if there's anything wrong, code block. That is meant to, because we want to say what the code block is supposed to do. That is meant to calculate the base parameter to the power of the exponent parameter, recursively. So I'm basically giving the intention of the function, and then I'm telling it to find what's wrong. So we'll go ahead and paste it, and let's see if it finds it. Okay, so we remember we deleted this part right here. It did actually catch that. And it actually gave some other stuff to think about. Again, stuff that I probably wouldn't have thought of. Like it doesn't really deal with negative exponents and it's maybe not the most efficient because recursion in general is not very efficient. And it actually gives me a revised version, which I think is pretty cool, as well as a disclaimer. So that's one way in which you can go ahead and you can troubleshoot code, but also you might have errors in your code. So for example, you might have, I guess I'm just going to give a really simplistic example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paste some code that I know has a syntax error. I'm going to say the following code throws a syntax error. Where might this error be? Where might this error originate in the code? And I'll go ahead and paste the code and we'll see if it can give me an answer. And it does kind of say where it is. I mean, obviously it's a simple error. It's pretty obvious that there is a syntax error there, but it's still a good illustration of how you could actually just put the type of error and just give any other information that you find relating to the error into ChatGPT along with the code and see if it can kind of trace the origin of the error if it's not very clear to you. Now, one thing I will say is that sometimes using something like Stack Overflow has been faster for me. Like I've actually wasted time using ChatGPT. So if you find yourself not really getting a clear answer on ChatGPT, go ahead and just try Googling. Just try Stack Overflow and you'll probably get a quicker answer. And just for context, Stack Overflow, if you haven't used it, it's just a large forum with a lot of, it's kind of like a Q&A forum for coding problems. And odds are, if you're having a problem, then a lot of other people have had that problem and you probably find an answer online. Now the final prompt, or the final feature is generating code or answering coding problems. Now I kind of already demonstrated this when I upload the exam paper, but one thing that ChatGPT is great for is prototyping a complete application or writing small snippets of code. So let's start with just generating small snippets of code. Let's say generate a program generate a simple web scraper. And a web scraper is a program that can basically copy all the data in a website programmatically in Python. So it's a pretty simple program. Let's see if it can generate it. Okay, so it actually did a pretty good job. It generated a small program that pretty much does everything that I would want it to do. Now let's try something a little bit larger scale. Let's say generate a simple e-commerce application in Python. And it's not simple at all. It actually requires quite a bit of code. And here I can actually illustrate one of the limitations of ChatGPT. So interestingly, it actually does give me some code. Okay, so actually that's not bad. However, this is really more like a homework assignment, not a full-fledged application. So let's say build me an online e-commerce platform using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And let's see if it can do that. I'm pretty sure it can't, but okay. So yeah, right here, it's not going to provide us with the whole program, but it's going to give us a basic outline and just some example code, but I think it's still a pretty significant advantage. So one thing it's great at is prototyping an application. So it can be really useful for giving you a sense of what an application will look like and what are going to be some of the challenges you'll face in building it without actually generating the code in an application. And one thing to keep in mind is that if you really want to generate a whole application, you can do it, but you need to do it in small pieces. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First is to catch any errors, because sometimes ChatGPT does make syntax errors. But also it's because every time you create a prompt, I wasn't creating very specific prompts, but you need to be very, very specific to make sure that that ChatGPT, so this is actually not very complicated, but maybe I might say something like generate a simple web scraper that looks for metadata from Iranian websites. Now, when you're generating code, it's really important to be as specific as possible, because otherwise you might not just get syntax errors, but you might get code that doesn't display all the behavior you want. That's another reason why it's important, if you're building a large application using ChatGPT, to do it in small components so that you can test each small component, so each piece of the code, and then make sure it does what you want it to do. So ChatGPT is great for just getting a sense of what it is you want to build and generating smaller snippets of code. But as far as generating a whole application, I wouldn't really recommend it for that. And if you do want to answer coding problems like we did in our first feature, then that is something that you can do quite easily as well. Now, last but not least, let's talk a little bit about subject-specific GPTs. So this is a GPT I created for the IB Computer Science exam. Now, this is just one of many GPTs that have probably come out in the last week, and as the public marketplace is launched, there'll probably be a lot of GPTs for a variety of uses. Now, what's special about these is these are trained specifically to follow the rules and to give you the information that you need for a specific purpose, which may be for an exam like the IB Computer Science exam, for the AP Computer Science exam, or for any other specialized program. And it's really cool because it can do things like, for example, generate IB pseudocode for a bubble sort. And this still requires some training, but basically IB pseudocode is a very specific type of language. That's pseudocode that's used on the IB Computer Science exam, and it's something that can't be generated by just ChatGPT. It requires specialized knowledge. And as you can see, it's not perfect. I don't think we have the repeat and until keyword. I'm still training it, but it's something that can be a very valuable tool in the future. So in many cases, a lot of these are still being developed, like this one, for example, but it's something to take into account because I feel that in the very near future, there's going to be a lot more of these types of GPTs that are going to be very, very finely tuned for their purpose. So to kind of summarize, these were 6 powerful examples of how a computer science student can use ChatGPT. Now, these also, I think, illustrate that ChatGPT can enhance and improve your existing knowledge, but it's not a replacement. You still require some knowledge of the subject you're studying in order to get the answers and the output that you want. So it's a tool, but it's not the end. So it's not something that you can just use to solve all of your problems. Anyways, I hope you found this useful. If you did, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day.